Awesome. Okay. So, hi everyone. My name is Helen Aquino. Thank you so much for coming to today's workshop on uh, Intro to Figma. It is part of our My Designing with Figma series, where you just get to learn the ins and outs of Figma to, spread the knowledge. Yeah. So, what better way to kick off Friends of Figma than with a beginner Figma workshop to get everyone up to speed? So this workshop is meant for absolute beginners with little to no experience with Figma. Think of this workshop as like your first step into using a powerful design tool in the industry so that designers can feel more empowered to create amazing designs and digital solutions. So in today's session, we'll learn how to make this resizable mini profile card with your name, profile picture, and like just a bit of like a status and a little button to say to message that person. We'll learn a bit more about different tools and functions we use along the way, and hopefully you follow along to make your own set of profile cards. So by the end of this session, you'll learn how to navigate through Figma's interface, create different elements like frames, shapes, and text, customize those layers properties, apply constraints, use auto layout, use and create styles throughout your work, use components, and then learn about the different visual design principles to apply to your design work. So a bit about myself. I am a UX designer focusing on mobile-first solutions and accessibility. I've been designing since 2020 for local groups and startups in Edmonton. So I graduated from University of Alberta in June 2023 with a specialization in computer science, but I discovered UX design along the way and I just fell in love with it. In 2021 or 2022, I co-founded ProtoJam, Alberta's first and I believe biggest UX designathon, which was really cool. And it's actually how I connected with Calgary UX. Louise was one of the sponsors there, and it was really cool seeing them there. Yeah, I hosted workshops and events there each year, so it's been really fun, like being able to teach students how to use Figma. And right now, I've been kind of doing, I've been on a sabbatical or a break after graduating to focus on like music and taking care of family, but things are looking up now, so I'm really excited to like jump back into UX. But enough about me. Let's open Figma. So let me paste this. So I'll post in the chat a link to a community file that you'll use if you want to follow along. Use the community file to make a copy of it, and then we'll make the mini profile card along the way. I won't take too much time to wait for you to open it, so just let me know if you're having troubles in the chat. But anyways, I'll switch over to Figma to do, yeah. So in a Figma design file, there are four general sections. So we have the toolbar, the canvas, and the left and right side panels. So if you have experience with like Sketch or Adobe Photoshop or Illustrator, some of these terms might be familiar to you. So firstly, we have the canvas. It's like big section in the middle. It's where you put and manipulate all your design elements and layers. So this is where I host all my slide my slides. Then we have the toolbar up top. So that's where you can access like essential tools like frames, rectangles, the pen tool, your different components and plugins, text, all that fun stuff. You can share, if you go on the right side, you can share your file with other people, preview your prototype. very helpful for when you're doing your design work. And then depending on what layer if you have a layer selected, there we go. If we click on this, you can see that the center of the toolbar will have different like context specific functions that are super helpful. So if I have this frame here, and then you can make a mask, create a component, and then so then next we have the left sidebar is where you can see all your different layers, pages, and assets. So you can open one page at a time and you would see all the layers within that page. So right now we're in our first page, the part one introduction, and you can see the different layers that we have here. And then finally on the right side, we have the layer properties. You can see the properties of any particular like frame or layer. So let's say if I like go back to this instance of the profile card. If you open it, yeah, you can see any fill, strokes, so colors, effects, etc. So now let's get started on working on our profile card. You can just work on any part of the canvas here. But firstly, let's talk about frames. Let me zoom in here. So frames are a type of container for design elements that can act as like a base for a screen. Very similar to artboards, you can adjust the properties of frames, but you can also nest other frames within other frames. So there are different ways to make frames. Firstly, you can select the frame tool at the toolbar, or you can press F for all y'all keyboard shortcut people. You can click and drag. You can use the frame guide here to click and drag and create a frame. So if you can see on my screen here, just made a little frame, nice little frame, and you can move it to anywhere on the canvas that you want. And then another way is that with the frame tool selected again, you can go on the right-hand panel and see a list of presets for common device sizes like phones, tablets, even presentation slides. It's a very extensive list. Let's say I want to make an iPhone mock-up. There's a wide selection of frames for different iPhone sizes, like the 14 and 15 Pro Max. And then you can also select here, I'll go back here. And you can also select multiple layers to create a frame between them. So if this is already selected into a frame, but if I ungroup this and then I select these again, I can right click and select frame selection, and I can make a frame for these. So let's go back to that frame we make. So try it out for yourself if you want to make the profile card. You can use the frame guide to create a profile card size frame for your profile card. And yeah, drag it anywhere on the canvas you want to work on for the rest of the session. So let's move on to shape tools and text, which is pretty self-explanatory, is different elements that you can add onto your canvas. So firstly, let's add a rectangle. You want to select the R to select, you can use R to select the rectangle tool and then click and drag to create like a little banner that spans the width of your card. And then you can also add other shapes like ellipses and lines. If we click on the drop down menu, there's a wide selection, including like even stars. You can add images, lines, all that. But for now, let's add a circle. So select the ellipses tool, which is O, and then you can hold shift while you create your circle to create like an even like perfect circle. And you can center it here for now. Let's also add some text. So to select text or to create text, press T or select the text tool on your toolbar, click within the frame, and let's type in your name, Helen Aquino, and then add another text layer to add like a status, like in social media, like add a status. I'll just put, what did I put for my currently watching my emotional support millennials. So you can adjust the size of your text box and all that. I'm gonna move around my text to kind of get that little bit of centering, get that centering done right now. Yeah, so are there any questions so far? I'll stop for a quick minute for questions. So now that we have most of our like design elements for our profile card, let's talk a bit about styles. So styles are used to define like the color, text, and any effects applied to objects, or to define the structure and appearance of layout grids. Styles is an effective way to maintain consistency across your design work, especially when your projects get bigger and bigger in scope. So there are four types of styles. Actually, I'll go back to so there are four different types of styles. So there's text styles for text layers. We have color styles for fill and stroke. We have effects styles for shadows and such, and grid styles for layout grid, which only applies to frame layers. So there's different ways you can access and add styles. So if you have a layer selected, styles can be accessed inside their respective properties section by clicking the four dots on the top right of that section. So if we go back to the file, let's say I want to add a color fill, like a color style for a color fill of the frame. We have the four dots here, styles and variables, and you can see that I already have some color styles here from previous workshops. But if you want to add a new one, just click on this new style or variable, and then make sure you have style selected. And then you can type in white, and then properties. Let's just go with like pure white, FFF. Create style. So now we can set this as kind of like a variable or definition. And there's another way to access, sorry, I completely forgot. There's another way to access uh, styles. So if you don't have a layer selected, so let's unselect that, you can see the different local styles that you have here. So we have a text style here, you have the color styles I've added. You can also add a style from here. So let's say if you want to make a text style, and then you can name your text style here, and then select the properties. So what I'll have you do now is add your own set of color and text styles. Make sure we'll have four color styles. So we have like a white/light style, we have a black/dark, a primary accent color, and a light accent color. You can use the colors that I have here, or you can use your own. I think I have the dark and the white one and the green. So now let's add the light accent color, light green. And then to change the color, you can select the square here, use the color dropper, and then create style. So now we have the light green on here. And then create three text styles. So we have heading, body, and button text. So we already have the button text here. If you don't have the body text style, feel free to add it. So what I'll do now is add the other two and add a text style. Let's do heading, or the style we'll use for your name. Enter. So I've added the kind of the typeface that I'm gonna use for the profile for each style. So here, let's use enter semi-bold 16 points, and then let's make the button text enter semi-bold 12 points. So now that we have kind of a set, like a tiny design system, let's continue on with styling the layer properties of our profile card. Let me just drag my profile card here. Oh, if you want to rename your layers, so instead of saying frame 13, you can call it, you can double click on the name of the frame layer and rename it profile card. Rename it here or on the left-hand panel here. So now let's customize our design elements. So there are a plethora of layer properties to explore and customize, but I'll talk about three common properties. So we have color fill that we've touched on previously. So for color fill, if we click the banner, you can choose like just a custom color. You You can click here and drag around to see if there's a color that you want, or you can go back to your color styles and select one of those. So for the profile cards banner, let's click on the banner and select the light green color style for it. Let's so we now have the so let's talk about the corner radius next. Self-explanatory to round the corners of rectangles and frames. You can find the corner radius on when you select your frame and go to this top section here in the right side panel. Have a little rounded corner here that says, when you hover over it, it says corner radius. Just adjust it to however you'd like. So let's say I'll go with 20 points. And now let's add a profile picture for our profile card. So under fill, when we select the circle, if we select this little square here, you can choose to use an image to fill your square. So I'm gonna choose image and I'll just choose I think I have my headshot here somewhere. Select that. There you go. You have an image to fill your circle. And then let's add kind of like a border around our profile picture. So if we go down a stroke, add a stroke with the plus button here, set this to outside so that you can see as much of your picture as possible. Kind of expand the thickness of your border. Let's say 5. That's pretty good. And then change the stroke color to the white. Yeah, our profile card is looking a lot better now. And now let's add the text styles to our text. So right now this is set to body text. Let's change this to heading, center it a little bit, and then yeah, this is the body text is good for for your status in your profile card. Did I miss anything? Are there any questions at this point? You can type in the chat or you can quickly speak out loud. Awesome. Then I'll continue on. Move this over here. So let's talk a bit about auto layout. So auto layout is a property that you can add to frames. It allows you to create designs that grow to fill or shrink to fit and reflow as their contents change. So this is great when you want to add new layers, accommodate text strings, or maintain alignment as your design evolves. So there's different sections to an auto layout. So if you have multiple items, you can choose in a layout, you can choose to have a vertical layout, horizontal layout, or wrapped layout. I think it's kind of self-explanatory, the first two, but the wrapped layout is when your container has reached a limit, it wraps around to expand below. Gap between refers to the gap between different elements in your auto layout. Padding, and then the alignment of items in this grid here. So if you wanted to align in a center axis, or if you want to align your elements at the top or at the bottom of your top or bottom axis. So with auto layout, let's make a button. It's a very common way to use auto layout. So first, let's add a text layer that says message. Right? Currently it's set to body text, so let's change that to our button text. It's color or text style. So now let's add a plus icon from the Feather Icons plugin. So plugins are a great way to make your design work more efficient. There's a lot of resources out there thanks to plugins that really speed up your design process. So if you want to access plugins, you can either click on the resources button up here and it'll open up to plugins immediately. As you can see, I already have Feather Icons saved. But if you don't have Feather Icons, you can search up Feather Icons here. It should have that selected. You can open it up. And then you can scroll down for message, I think the send icon is a bit more appropriate. So now we have a little send icon here that we can drag into our profile card. If what did I say next? Okay, so now we select the button text and the button icon. Select both of them with using either by holding down either Shift or Control, and then create or add an auto layout. So you can use Shift A or right click, add auto layout. So it'll automatically set to horizontal layout depending on how the elements were kind of aligned beforehand. But if it isn't currently set to horizontal layout, make sure it's set to horizontal layout. Let's adjust the space between so we can reduce that to, let's say, 5. That's good. And then align left center. That's also good. I think the icon is a little bit too big for the button. So let's adjust the width and height of it. So if you want to constrain proportions, click on this icon and let's set this to, let's say, 16. Awesome. And then for the vectors, adjust the width, the stroke width to 1, just so that doesn't look too clunky. But that's just a personal preference. So now this is what we have for our buttons so far. So let's add a bit of padding so we can make it very clickable. So if we go to the auto layout properties, you can add horizontal padding and vertical padding. If you want to customize the different paddings for top and bottom and left and right, you can select individual padding, but for our purposes, we don't need to do that. Let's go with let's try 50 for padding, horizontal padding. That's good. And then 10 for vertical padding, or yeah, vertical padding. That's I'd say that looks good for our button. So let's add a color fill to actually see what the full button looks like. So if let's add the primary green color style for our button and then change the text and icon to the white color style. So for a quick shortcut, if you click on your frame or auto layout and go down to selection colors, you can see that the different colors that are being used. So we have the green here and black, the pure black. We can see which elements are using these. Awesome. So it says that the button text, and the icons are using it. So let's change it to white, selection colors, change this to white, and it's a lot more visible, the text. And finally, let's round out the corners for this. So now we have our button. Are there any questions at this point in time? Okay.
Hello, Helen.
Hi.
Actually, I have a question.
For sure. Yeah.
The Okay, thank you. The message, yeah, I saw you edited the message, the text, the message, and then add the icon.
Mm-hmm.
How did you use the shortcut to add another frame?
Sorry? Could you repeat that?
Oh, I mean the message. I saw the message and the icon was kind of included in a frame, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I just missed the third step. I mean, we have a kind of a main frame is in your screen that is frame 15. I guess, do we
Mm-hmm.
have a second frame?
So the frame for 15 is the frame that's housing both the button text and the icon. Technically, the icon is a frame and then it has the vectors, but does that help? It does. Frame 15 should be the icon that should be the frame that you're selecting to see the selection colors down here. So
Hmm.
there you go.
Or maybe, yeah, or I saw, yeah, on your left, like a little bit below frame 15, there's a sand. It's a
Mm,
sand. yeah, a little bit on your left, a little
Mm-hmm.
bit be, yeah, the sand. That's what I'm talking about. Is sand this one a frame as well? Oh,
Yeah,
looks,
so send is just a regular frame. It doesn't have any auto layout. Um, that's just containing the two vectors that make up the little paper airplane icon for our send icon. If you wanna if you wanna select both the icon and the message, make sure you select frame 15. Actually, I'm gonna rename this frame 15 to button, which should hopefully make more sense.
Helen, do you mind if I jump in?
Yeah, for sure.
Hi, Sunny. I have I'm curious. Are you a developer?
oh, yes.
Yeah. So the send frame that Helen has there, imagine as if like an SVG, like when you put an icon on your on let's say on your project when you're coding and you have an SVG file. That in this case, that could be the send icon, and the frame that it's wrapping the text and the icon could be like your div. I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh,
Does
yeah.
does that make sense?
Oh, no, actually, yeah. I'm not very familiar with SVG as well, but
Oh, okay, okay. You're okay. You're another type of developer. Okay, okay. I was just
hmm.
wondering because yeah, in Figma, it's I mean, the logic could be a little bit similar if you're familiar with the front, for example, for the front end coding, but it's just named differently. But yeah, it's just like the main frame in this case that is the button that is wrapping the text and the icon. That could be like your main frame in this case. But usually when you import files like icons in this case, sometimes they are wrapped as well into another frame. But the difference here is like Helen put the button with auto layout. That's another property on Figma, and the send icon is just a regular frame. Yeah, sorry
Oh,
Helen for
okay.
jumping in.
Oh,
No, all
yeah.
good.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Oh, yeah. I think now I got it. Yeah, actually, yeah. I saw, yeah, the
Awesome.
button frame. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sunny. Um, Actually, we have another question. Do you mind explaining the hug versus fixed content settings under frame? Yes, of course. I actually have that in the slides. So with auto layout, you can have three different options for sizing your auto layouted frame. So um we have your typical like fixed width, fixed height. That's just like any other layer that hasn't been auto layouted. Um, but then there's also options to hug contents. So hug content. So you know how we have padding? So the hug contents, it's designed to sh like what I say earlier, to shrink. So the auto using hug content in your auto layout can help your frame shrink. Um, in your frame do is it yeah, shrink to fit like just the text or just whatever items you have in your auto layout. So let's take this button for example, right? I have two, just the text and the icon. Um, with the hug contents, the size, so the width is only consisting of the width of the text, the width of the icon, and the padding between and the space between. Yeah, horizontal gap between the items. So it doesn't have any like extra spaces in between. Does that make sense? And then same thing with like height. So the height of the button only consists of the height of the tallest element in your auto layout. And I guess that in this case, it would be the icon frame here. So the height consists of the 16 points from the icon and the padding, the vertical padding. So the 10 points in each side. So that's hug contents. There's also an option for fill container. So fill container applies to elements that are inside an auto layout. So if you have like an auto layout frame that's only within that isn't nested inside an auto layout, then you won't have that option. So actually, I'm gonna take this. Where's my auto layout? I'm gonna unlock this. I'll use this as an example. So this is this shift like when keyboard shortcut is an auto layout. So if I click shift, right now the height is set to fill. So for fill container, the height of the element will just expand all the way until it hits kind of the paddings of the container it's nested in. So what I say here, yeah, the fill container is the size of the container minus the container's padding. So if we click on the auto layout here, we have vertical padding set to 8 points. So the size of shift would be whatever the size of the container is, 40 points minus the 16 points from the vertical padding. So 24. Does that help? Yeah, awesome. Cool, thank you. Okay, so we set an auto layout for we made our button. Now let's move on to setting constraints. So constraints allow you to fix elements of your design to different size of their parent container or frame. This lets you build fluid layouts to support multiple device sizes and breakpoints within like the same group. So there's different types of constraints. I hope this isn't too overwhelming, but so let's say we have left and top. Currently what this profile picture is set to. It maintains the object's position relative to the left side and the top of the frame. Same thing if you have like right and top or bottom and left. It'll maintain that object's position relative to whatever side it's set to. So for basically all of our elements in the profile card is centered. So we can actually just use the center constraint to keep our elements centered. So what I say here. So let's add some constraints to make the profile card responsive. We can set the constraints of all of these to center and top. We don't really need to worry about like the bottom being adjusted, but you can just set it to top. For the little banner background thing here, if we want to keep it just across, keep it covering like the width of the card, instead of center, let's set it to left and right. So now that we have our card, if we adjust the width of it, our different elements in the card will stay centered because we set that center constraint. And then with the left and right constraint, we can also like the rectangle banner kind of expands with the container. And after the workshop, just feel free to explore the other constraints. Not gonna lie, constraints are still something that I struggle with a little bit, but this should, for the most part, shouldn't be too bad. So now that we have our constraints, we essentially have one profile card done. So let's move over here and continue to make kind of like a set of profile cards using components. So components are a very important aspect of Figma. They enable you to reuse existing elements of your design, saving so much time on otherwise repetitive and tedious work. So instead of like making this profile card from scratch, we can just turn this to a component and kind of edit each instance of the profile card. So like adding different profile pictures and like editing the names so it's not like the same person over and over again. So components create new instances rather than copies, which allow you to override any properties directly on the canvas. So to create components, to set something as a component, you can right click on the frame on profile card and then select create component. And you'll know if something is a component if it has the little if it's outlined in purple instead of blue and it has a little like component icon here. You can also with the profile card selected, you can also go up to the toolbar up top to create component. Either or works. So now we have a profile card component. So to be able to use instances of your component, let's go to assets. So it'll be on the top of your left side panel. You can see here the different components that we have. Go to profile card and then select insert instance. So now we have an instance of the profile card. So any changes that we make on this is the main component. Any changes we make on the main component will reflect on the different instances. So you can tell if something is an instance if we go to the layers panel, if it has like the outline diamond rather than this like grid of diamonds. So let's say if we change the color of the light green to actually here, also you can duplicate like your components by use Control D or Command D, whichever OS you're on. I'm just gonna duplicate one more to see kind of make my point better. So if we go on the banner, deselect light green, just in this case, and then change it to a wildly different color, the purple, you can see that the changes in the main component have like occur across the different instances. But if we select an instance and then change the color for that, let's wait, hold on. It only applies to that particular instance, so it won't affect the other instances or the main component. Let's undo all that. There we go. Yeah, so now that you have your profile card and instances, feel free to edit the other images to like your favorite character or your favorite celebrity and like customize it however you want. Um, like how I did the top here. These are just random people, but you know what I mean. You know what I mean. Okay, where did it go? There it is. Do. Okay, so we are running out of time. So actually, I'll go through the design principles, then we'll kind of finish up with like this part. So technically so now we've learned how to use like essential functions on Figma. Actually, I'm gonna go back to the slides. And I could technically end the session here. But what if you're new to visual design and you don't know how to make something look good, or you're not confident that something looks good? So the good news is that, or at least I believe that everyone has an innate sense of like good and bad design. All you need to learn is how to pinpoint what makes a design good. So one place to start is with the CRAP principles. So it's an acronym of 4 guiding principles, foundational guidelines for good design. So CRAP stands for contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. So these guidelines are a good starting point to help make your design work more intuitive, more readable, and professional looking, all to give your users a better digital experience. So let's go over each principle in detail. So first we have contrast, the idea of making distinct elements stand out. Sometimes we need to put a lot of information in our design, so we have to lead the viewer's eye to emphasize the most important details of a screen. We can create contrast through different ways, like with text, like using bold, large headings and smaller body text. Or we can use color. When using color to create contrast, keep in mind that there may not actually be enough contrast between some color combinations. So the best way to check is by either making your designs grayscale, like the example on the right hand of the screen. So you can see that with the bad contrast, like they do use different colors, but if you put it onto grayscale, um, you'll see that's actually hard to read because a lot of these colors are so bold that there's isn't enough contrast for the eye to like differentiate that when it's in grayscale. So you can see in the good contrast column, the background is a little softer. You have like the bold red at the foreground, same with the bold like, text in the foreground. And if we put it to grayscale, it's a lot more contrast, a lot easier to read. So to check if so to check the contrast between two colors, whether if it's good or not, you can also use contrast checker tools to check if two colors pass web accessibility guidelines. So I'm gonna copy and paste a link to a contrast ratio checker, and then I'll go back here. Let's go back to our profile card. Let's take the green here. Let's check the contrast between oh my gosh, between the white text and the green background. Let's paste this here and then FFF. So you can see that it has contrast ratio of 7. I believe it's over 4, like a contrast ratio of 4 that passes web accessibility guidelines. Correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, if you see a green number here, then that means you're doing a good job. It should be readable for most scenarios. Feel free to try that if you use a different accent color for your profile card. Can play around with it once the workshop's over. And let's move on to repetition. So the next term in our CRAP principles is repetition, or essentially consistency, the consistency of elements across your design. It's important for your work to have a sense of cohesion, where you can create consistency through color, fonts, or how your content is organized. You can also break repetition to make something stand out. So blog posts are a good example of repetition. Each blog post has kind of like the same kind of layout. So you have the title, the subtitles with like the author and the date, a bit of like text sometimes, and then the like a thumbnail image. And it makes this like repeating layout makes it a lot easier to scan through your content and see like, oh, which blog posts you actually want to read about. So to maintain repetition in your work, keep variations of an element's like style to a minimum across your design. So in Figma, using components and styles in your work are a good way of maintaining consistency. So next we have alignment, the third of our CRAP principles. So which refers to the deliberate placement of your design elements. So alignment is a really easy way to like make or break the structure of your design. Make sure you align your elements intentionally. Otherwise, your design might look like messy or clunky. Um, Slide deck, for example, usually like the text is aligned to the left and like with the top of the image is like aligned with the top. Actually, that doesn't apply this time, but you know what I mean. Um, Usually screens are meant to be read from top to bottom, so left alignment is your best option for text, but center alignment is also good for stuff like short headings or images and buttons. So if we go back to our profile card, we can see that you can kind of see the center alignment if you like draw a line down across the profile card. You can see that it's like the center alignment is quite intentional. So aligning your design elements is pretty easy with Figma. For starters, you can move a design layer around and it'll snap to nearby elements. So let's can kind of see that here. You can see the different like orange lines. If the line is across the whole container, that means it's center aligned and according to relative to that container. Auto layout and layout grids are also great ways to maintain alignment across your design. So finally, we have proximity, the final term in our CRAP principles. So it's the idea that the closer elements are naturally grouped together, and then they're going to be distinct from other elements that are further apart. So just like how you put for example, your dishes in one part of the kitchen and your cutlery in another part. Grouping related items is helpful for scannability and organizing your content. So for example, with this business card in the middle, all the details are spread out and you have to read each line to kind of understand what they are. So you have the address here, the city, state, I believe the phone number, and website, which is fine if it's like just those elements there, but it gets a little harder to read if everything is spaced out evenly like that. But with this right example, or on the right-hand side, if you group the location together, you can like your brain is able to take that shortcut and say like, oh, this is the address of Joe's Graphics. And then the bottom grouping of the contact information, your brain's gonna be like, oh, that's how I can reach out to this person instead of reading each thing immediately because our brain loves shortcuts. Yeah, so actually it's 8:01, so I think I'm gonna end this here. So that concludes our workshop. So you've now learned how to make a simple design in Figma and learned some foundational design principles to guide your work. So if you have the workshop file on hand, you can always refer back to the file if you want to continue learning. Or if you're like, yawn, give me a challenge. We actually have a second half of the workshop. Details are still to be announced, but it's happening. It'll be more intermediate level tips and tricks to working around Figma and like best practices and such. So if you want to know more about that, make sure to stay updated with Friends of Figma Calgary. But yeah, if you want to reach me, I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn. I think I have my LinkedIn profile is in the event page. But yeah, thank you so much for attending the workshop. I hope this has been helpful for you, for those of you learning Figma for the first time. If there are no other questions, I'll pass it off to Valeria and Louise.
Thank you, Helen. We had a question before. I just don't want to go
Oh
missing.
yeah, for sure.
Yes. So it was from Ali, I think.
Yeah.
Let me find it. How do you shrink the logo?
How do I shrink the logo?
Yes, that's
Do
our
they mean the
question right now.
icon?
I assume is the icon, I think.
Okay. So if you're talking about if you want to shrink the icon, you can always here, I'll zoom in here so you can see it better. So you can kind of drag the frame to adjust to shrink the icon, or if you want to expand it, that too. But yeah, let's shrink it if that's what they were talking about. You can also just manually type in like the size that you want here. So let's what I want 14 points for the frame. I hope that helps. Oh yeah, all good, all good. Um, it didn't work. Is it still working or is it still not working for you, Allie? Okay, yeah, for sure. But yeah, if something's wrong, it might have to do with the vectors itself, because you can like independently adjust the size of the vectors versus adjusting the size of the frame holding the vectors. If you adjust the vectors, I mean, if you adjust the frame, it should shrink. The vector should shrink. But if you're adjusting the vectors themselves, then that might be a little different. Yeah. So the adjusting the vectors won't affect the frame inside or the frame holding the vectors. But yeah, are there
Awesome.
any other questions?
Yeah, we're still open for more Q&A. Yeah.
Hi, this is Troy. I have a quick question
Yeah.
regarding if you can hear me okay,
Oh yeah, yeah.
regarding auto layout
Mm-hmm.
and well, actually before that, what's the difference between frames and groups? When would I
Um,
use a frame? When would I use a group?
it's a good question.
Great
Um,
one.
so frames allow you to, okay, correct me if I'm wrong, because I won't be able to like I might not say the right thing. Um, frames allow to sh kind of shrink and grow the elements inside, while um groups are just like a category, like it doesn't affect the like the sizing or like the properties of the set of elements at all. So let's say, okay, let's set this as a group. Oh, okay, I guess you can shrink it. Never mind. There's a good like article on Figma resources actually, if you want to look
Okay.
into groups versus frames, but
It sounds like a frame might be more like a container in web development parlance, but a group is more like just a folder for organizing things. It
yeah.
attaches them relatively, but you don't have that much control. If you want to keep things organized, group things, but if you want more individual control of a certain thing, throw it in a frame.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And well, like frames, you can if I set this to frames, you can actually like add, I mean, you can add fills, you can add colors. It's kind of like a glorified rectangle in relation to in relation to groups. Like with, if I go here, click on the frame here, ungroup. If I select this as a group, yeah, there isn't an option to edit the frame or the group itself because yeah, it's not like it's not something you can like manipulate. I don't, it's hard to explain, but
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
Louise has a
Thanks.
really good answer in the
Yeah.
chat. I'm just like
Thanks.
reading through it.
Thanks.
Yeah,
I'll copy this.
yeah. Thanks, Troy.
Yeah.
Awesome. Do we have any other question for Helen?
My name is Eugene, and I have a question for like organize and rename all the frames or like auto layout frames. Is there any tips for organize and rename the frames?
If you want to rename frames, you can, on the canvas, you can click on the name itself, like double click,
Mm-hmm.
and then just, yeah, rename it to whatever,
Mm-hmm.
let's say, I'll just change it to Helen profile. You can
Yeah.
change it there,
Mm-hmm.
or yeah, like you can change it on the layers
Mm-hmm.
panel on the left-hand side. Same
Yeah.
thing, double click on it
Mm-hmm.
and change it. In
I
terms of, oh
know.
yeah, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I know how to change the name, but like when I like do working, I'm kind of confused. I should change this name or not. I shouldn't change. I don't have to change the name, or I have to change all the frames. Like,
That's a personal preference. Like, if you're working on a small project and you can like handle just random frame 15 or frame 35 or rectangle 1, it should be fine if it's smaller, but if you're working on bigger projects, then maybe I would suggest naming stuff. Like for example, I have a lot of slide decks here that are named like according to the content. If it's just like slide 1 or slide 2, it's a little hard to navigate. You know what I mean? So it's just like a personal thing. But if someone else presenting this is okay with just going through like having slide 1, slide 2, slide 3 as their frame names, that's totally fine. I don't think there's a right or wrong way to in terms of naming practices.
Yeah, I would add, if you are currently working on a team, especially, and if you work with developers, and I mean, at the end of the day, somebody's going to uh, uh, develop or code what you're designing. It's a good practice to name the layers, especially for the handoff to the developers. But yeah, like Helen said, there's no like a right or wrong way to do it. Especially if you're a solo and if you're just doing it for yourself, it's up to you. But yeah, if you're working with other people, it's a good practice to name your layers. And I think we have the same trouble as the developer sometimes when they have to name classes. For example, with us, it's a problem to name layers because sometimes we don't know how to name it or name them. But yeah, it's just a good practice though.
yeah, it's a confused because last week I got my first freelancing UX design job. So like after like 2 hours, I didn't like rename the all the frames. So like it was very confused when I wanted to re-edit. So yeah, I was wondering to know like how you guys to like organize your all the frames and all the like pages. So yeah, that's good like tips for me. So yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
No problem. Sometimes I do name, like especially when I'm doing the final designs or the UI, I start naming all my layers. But yeah, sometimes it gets tricky if you wait until they're all the screens are created, especially if you're working on a bigger project. But yeah, just like you can do more of it, more practicing and naming your layers at first, maybe at the end, or while you were working on it. It's yeah, you can. Everybody has a different way of doing it, but yeah, you can just practice on it and see what works best for you.
Mhm. Thank you.
Awesome. Do we have another question for Helen or for us or in general?
Oh, there's one here.
Yeah.
I know the practice is the only way to improve the sense of contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity, but how do you practice the sense of them?
Oh, good question.
Oh, let's get how do you practice the sense of them?
There I don't know if I can think of a specific course, an online course, or maybe something on YouTube. Maybe yes, maybe something on YouTube. You can look for it, and sometimes they do have a few projects that you can do to practice on. I would say getting your hands on projects that will give you a good sense of how to practice these things, because there's not like I can't remember if there's anything like an exercise to practice repetition or contrast or proximity or things like that. But in general, I would say like maybe on YouTube or an online course, they usually have sometimes they have projects like, I don't know, like create my first website, or design my first website, or let's design my first landing page, or things like that. And this also are not only principles of UX design. These are design principles in general. So you can find this even on like let's say a graphic design course or a graphic design tutorial or things like that. So if you can find any like that you like a course or a YouTube tutorial, sometimes they do have some projects that where you can practice these things.
I think I also want to say that like, oh, wait, right?
Awesome. Luis just shared one. Awesome.
Oh,
It's a
that was
game.
fun.
Nice. Awesome.
I also want to like add on to that. Like, I think it's a good idea to like ask for feedback in like your design, so it's not just you figuring out what like whether the sense of like contrast, alignment, repetition, proximity is good or not. So you get feedback from other designers, other whoever your users are. Um, yeah, just to get a sense of what they feel is good. So that kind of gives you like a more educated like understanding if you're unsure of your sense of like craft principles.
Any more questions? Okay. Perfect.
Yeah. Thank you
Perfect.
guys for
So
coming.
thank you so much, Helen. Thank you. Thank you for doing this great workshop. Thank you for answering all the questions. And yeah, so we don't have any more questions. I would like to start wrapping up our first event. And yeah, so I think for you guys that don't know us yet, my name is Valeria. I'm a product designer living in Calgary. And so we started this community along with Calgary UX with the great Luis that it's right behind and answering all your concerns on the chat. We both started this a couple of months ago. We were talking about like, hey, we just saw that Friends of Figma is opening, accepting new groups again. So we were like, okay, let's. Why don't we start one group in Calgary because there was no group in Calgary before that. And so yeah, that's how everything started. And right now, this is our first event and of many, I hope. And yeah, unfortunately, we had to make it online this time. I mean, it's unfortunate for the ones who are in Calgary that want to meet in person, but for those of you that don't live in Calgary, it is perfect. And we will continue doing online events for those people that cannot join us in person. But we hope to have very soon more in-person events so you guys can do more networking, meeting cool people, and just having some fun. And of course, if you don't know this yet, all of our events are going to be free. We are not ever charging for any tickets for our events, so it's important for you to know that it's a rule from Figma, and that's pretty cool. And yeah, so we are planning a lot of awesome and great things. Of course, one of those is the second part of this workshop series from Helen. We don't have the date, as she said, as she mentioned before, but yeah, we're hoping to get you more updates on that. And I'm gonna share for those of you who have not joined our community yet. I'm gonna share the links on the chat, and we are never spamming. We promise no spam, no spam at all. But this is for those of you who wants to keep in touch and also to send you more updates on where are these future events happening, where and when. And of course, for those of you who want to do, more networking or talking with, the community in general. So there you can join us. And yeah, so I don't know if Helen, you have anything else to add or anything you would like to say, or Louise maybe.
No, nothing. Just like shout out to you, Valeria and Louise, for kicking off Friends of Figma Calgary. I'm really looking forward to see how the community grows.
Awesome. No, thanks to you. Thank you for the amazing work you have done. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the second part of this workshop series and hopefully more of those. So yeah, you guys have anything else to add, or do you have any more questions? Feel free to jump out right now, or just if you want to join us on our Discord server. Luis, I don't know if you want to share anything from Calgary UX on the chat. If not, you can also follow Calgary UX on LinkedIn. We are also creating a lot of events with Calgary UX, and sometimes in the future we'll have more of these collaborations, of course, between Calgary UX and Friends of Figma Calgary. And yeah, so if you happen to have any more questions after we finish this call, feel free to just connect with us on LinkedIn, as Valeria Vichy on LinkedIn, and just please follow us on LinkedIn as well, and Calgary UX as well. We are on LinkedIn, and yeah, so awesome. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us today. And I hope I can see you either on our Discord server or anywhere on the internet. And I hope to see you again in one of our events. Thank you so much for joining us.